Hello everyone and welcome back to Omsi 2. The Optare Solo was released a week ago, but the reception was not quite what was expected. For a bus that has been anticipated within the Omsi 2 community, UK community since the dawn of the Omsi UK community, the reviews of the Solo leaves a few unanswered questions. As you may know, the Solo was released last week, but with it came some significant backlash leading to the Discord server, the V3D, or the one that basically is V3D's Discord server, being timed out and restructured, and comments being removed and starting a scratch. Furthermore, it led to mixed reviews on Steam, particularly among the UK community. Why all the backlash, and is it warranted? Well, let's find out. In this video, I'm going to be giving you a review of the Solo and what people have been saying on Steam, and in like one YouTube review video that you'll probably know which video I'm talking about once you, if you've seen it. So I'm not going to be naming names or anything, but you know, people can make connections themselves if they so wish. But basically, I'm going to kind of summarize it, and then I'm going to say is it justified or not. And we're going to be doing that while we drive line 55 in Oatford. So basically, the negative reviews, so there's a few reasons for them, but I guess first of all, I'm going to mention what they actually say, and I guess like what's the crux of them, and then we'll go on to what's fueling those, and then, you know, how justified or, you know, they are. So the first thing people have done is they've complained about the sounds, and I think the sounds is something even when we did the first drove the bus for the first time, we recognized they weren't great. V3D hasn't, you know, shied away from that fact, and he has openly admitted that they are not great and that he is not happy with them. And this is something he also did with the Enviro 200 MC, so it's not like he's claiming otherwise. Then the other thing people have complained about is the textures. Apparently the textures are really low quality. Now, the only places that are kind of low quality where it's noticeable is the engine. So as you can see here, the EST engine is not great. Like there's two layers that merge together. That is quite poor there, not gonna lie. However, again, why the engine is so important, I'm not sure. But like one of the reviews like made a big deal about the whole fact about the tires and the engine. That the tires were reused from somewhere else. Again, why this is important, I don't know. Like who's gonna be zooming into the tires, and well, why does he want the model from scratch? Whoever wrote the review, model from scratch. I think like some of it's just like having a laugh a bit. Regarding the engine, like it's probably fair. I don't think it's a major thing. No one's really looking at the engine, and it is a bit of a waste to have like a proper, like fully detailed engine interior wise when no one's going to really look at that. That's like, for example, I didn't even know this thing where you can open this at the front. It's just kind of cool, but again, it's not really necessary. And I'm going to kind of get on onto this later about like all these features that buses have these days, that like that UK buses have these days, that may not be necessary. People have also complained that the texturing, the way that this has been textured is outdated, and that there's much easier ways to, like there's much more modern ways to texture stuff within Omsi 2 using Substance Painter, and that V3D should invest in this. So I'm going to kind of start talking about all these, like responding to all these points, because I think they have some implications that are worth highlighting. So I guess first of all, and there's also then, I guess people have been also saying that, you know, it's not very high quality, and there's also a lack of shadow, like ocular occlusion, something about basically there's a lack of shadows, which makes it look a bit less realistic, which could be the case. Again, I don't know how noticeable that is, but that is what's been said in the review. So first of all, regarding the sounds, I mean the sounds aren't great. They weren't great when they were released. He has upped them a bit. I've never been on the Solo, so I can't really comment how accurate they are, but you know, yeah, they're not amazing, but like they do the job.
Hello, lad.
That kind of thing. But like, and then this is the thing, so like yes, the sounds are probably the biggest issue with the Solo, and that is something that is like out there. If you've watched any YouTube video, or most YouTube videos, or if you've even been to V3D's Discords or read the reviews, you'll know about that. So that isn't, you know, something that's, let's say, hidden. So yes, it's an issue, but like V3D has said he's going to try get some new sounds. I guess for me the main thing about the Solo, like I personally like the bus. I think the only thing is it'd be nice to have more than one engine variant, because it is a bit lacking compared to the Spectre, in the sense that it only has, although the Spectre only had one engine variant as well, I think, but like it'd be nice to have another engine variant, but it doesn't. It's not the end of the world, it's just the way it is. But apart from that, like, yeah, I think the engine variants are okay. I think when it comes to the textures and you know, I think the sounds are okay. They're not amazing, but you know, they're what they are. And I think this is the first thing with the sound. This is that a lot of people have made comparisons directly regarding Studio Polygon and Master Switch buses, which I think is and isn't necessarily reasonable. I think first of all, people have seem to have forgotten the light when it was first released, and seem to have forgotten the Gemini 3, like the Gen 3 pack when they were first released, because the light when it was, or when it moved over to Studio Polygon, had serious issues. First of all, the sounds are dreadful, and I don't even think the Streetlight sounds are ideal at the moment. The Cumans one are okay, the Daimler one doesn't really sound like a Daimler. And one of the things people complained about was the fact that the Solo is using default sounds for like the horn, and that's not something that is the case with like other buses. Well, actually, the Studio Polygon uses the retarder sounds from the MAN SD202, and it doesn't even properly have the retarder sounds, which are quite characteristic on a Daimler street lights. So I think this whole comparison of how the streetlights are an amazing bus, it really isn't. It's not a bad bus, but like by no stretch of the imagination is it like superb or anything like to a much higher quality than the Solo. I personally don't think so anyway. Like the Renown, sure it is, but like the light, I don't think so, and that's what people are comparing it to. And people are saying like the lights are better, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think the light has issues with the sounds as well, especially the Daimler. So just kind of, that's the first thing. But I guess the other thing that, you know, people keep saying like that basically the Solo doesn't model things the way that the UK community does, and really I think this is where the first issue I guess arises, is that people keep comparing this to like Studio Polygon and Master Switch, which is fair, but I think people, and because this then leads to another thing, because okay, Master Switch Studio is not so much, it's not the case, because Master Switch isn't really that driven by profit, but Studio Polygon is. And yes, that they spend a lot more time modeling the buses, but like, you know, with Studio Polygon I get the impression that, you know, they're much more concerned about the monetary motive, hence why they focus a lot more on like the models and like all these extra features, which in some ways can be referred to as gimmicks. I mean, reviews have said like being able to open the engine on the Solo is a gimmick, so by no stretch of the imagination we can call some of the features like gimmicks, because they don't really, the most players don't really make much of a difference. But anyway, the point there is that they try to make a lot more money from this, whereas V3D, like his main motive isn't money. I think realistically, like the only reason he got this bus finished is because like to get it out there, because he was building it. So yes, that hence means it is a bit rushed, which is not ideal. But again, what this means is that like yes, people keep comparing it to Studio Polygon, but now what we've seen is that Studio Polygon no longer puts stuff on Steam, instead they put it on their own website, which has a whole load of other issues. So that's the first thing, and this is because, you know, when you have developers that are basically putting a lot more time in and they're doing a lot more stuff, then they might tend to do what Studio Polygon does, as put stuff on their own website, which isn't great and has a lot of its own limitations. I think that's why the first thing to note when we're comparing this, because they're comparing this to the light, but Studio Polygon's no longer going to put stuff on Steam, whereas Richly is. So the pricing works a bit differently. And that's the second thing. People have complained about the price of this, and this is what people have complained about the price. And look, €15 is a bit much, considering this bus pack doesn't have that many things. I will grant it that. That being said, it is the average price of a bus pack, and actually bus packs for Omsi 2 now cost upwards of €18 to €22. So it's, you know, considering inflation, it is like €15 is always the cheapest for a bus pack on Steam. Usually actually made it lower by putting it at €10. So yes, it is more expensive, and like personally, if you don't like the Solo and the sounds, you probably are better off waiting for a sale. I will absolutely grant that. But basically, what that means is that yes, the price is more expensive, but at the same time, it's also rather cheap considering what's on Steam, and it's on Steam. Because people comparing it to Studio Polygon, I think is slightly unfair, because the Studio Polygon Lite was released 3 years earlier. Now what Studio Polygon is doing is they're posting it on their own website, where they've increased the price, and bear in mind that VGD makes £5 for this, whereas Studio Polygon makes the full £18 from that. So the whole pricing thing is a bit messy, because yes, the price is increased, but that's because there's also Steam and Eversoft in the intermediaries, whereas VGD is only really making £1 extra. Whereas Studio Polygon, when they increase the price, they're not making £4 extra just from going from like £12.18, so £6 extra. I'm converting stuff back from euro to pounds is getting a bit confusing, because they're making previously in the light about £5, they're making an additional £13, which is quite a substantial difference. So I think it's just, when you're talking about price, it gets a bit messy when people try to compare stuff with Studio Polygon because they've moved to a different pricing model. So I think that's worth highlighting, because then people have complained that, like, some of the people who have complained that Solo is overpriced, and people are saying like the Studio Polygon is worth the price and the price increase is justified, but they've completely ignored that fact, which I think is quite crucial and actually changes the whole, you know, whole implications of it all. But that being said, regarding the price, once we've accounted for that, it is more expensive, but again, it is pretty cheap considering what you get there out on Omsi, and it is on Steam, which is much better for the community, I would assert. But that's the second thing. People keep saying like, oh yeah, this should be the same price as the Spectra, but then people like, now people make different arguments, but I'm just kind of aggregating stuff up, because then people were saying like, oh yes, the price increase for Renault is justified for, let's say, inflation, but then they're not saying the same thing for the Solo, which, you know, now maybe it's different people, so it's hard to know who's saying what, but that's just something that we're highlighting there, because people who follow the Omsi community closer than I do might know who's saying what, and you know, if it's the same people or not, I don't know, but I think it's just worth highlighting there. And then also, when we talk about, you know, people talk about the textures, and this is the issue. Like, people are saying that V3D should use Substance Painter, and I think the whole thing is, okay, I'm not really going to talk about Master Switch Studios, because to be fair, Master Switch Studios hasn't said anything. They've just been brought up by people who have been reviewing their Solo, and they haven't been fueling anything. Whereas Studio Polygon, at least some members within Studio Polygon, have been adding fuel to the fire, so they will be mentioned because they are in part attributing to this backlash and making it worse than it needs to be, which then has implications for the whole Omsi community, because it just increases toxicity, and it means that less people develop stuff for Omsi 2, and means more developers just don't post updates. I'll get more about that later on, and it's kind of the implications from the backlash. But basically, you know, for instance, like, we had fuel thrown to the fire when Studio Polygon said, buses with good sounds your thing, get the Renault on discount. This is the third time they put discount in the 1 month. Again, indicates that obviously profit is something that makes you concerned about, or at least I think so. But anyway, the point there is that, look, usually yes, the point there is then that people are saying that V3D should use Substance Paint, and they keep comparing it to Studio Polygon because Studio Polygon uses higher quality texturing tools. I think the issue there is that, first of all, people fail to recognize that V3D is different from Master Studios and Studio Polygon, and for some reason people think that the UK community needs to adhere to the standards of Studio Polygon. But that's not the case, because, and the reason that's not the case is because at the end of the day, developers are entitled to make buses the way they want to, and no, you don't have to buy the bus. And because at the same time, people were saying that if you don't like how the Renaults are on their website, don't buy it. But then the same argument holds: if you don't like how the Solo is done, don't buy it. Like, if you don't like that they don't use Substance Painter, don't buy it. But don't then complain that it doesn't use Substance Painter, because why would a developer who isn't that interested in, you know, modding for Omsi 2, considering they have said on many occasions that they think Omsi 2 is dead, why would they bother in, you know, spending time on Substance Painter to mod for Omsi 2 when it's not something that they're overly keen about? And I think this is the problem. People compare it to Studio Polygon and Master Switch. They're trying to impose standards for UK buses that don't exist elsewhere. Like, if you look at the German bus DLCs that are released, like say the MB 0560, the texture quality is nowhere near the quality that the Studio Polygon or Master Switch buses are, because they're similar to the model quality that V3D does. So, you know, I think maybe that's a fairer comparison, because again, Studio Polygon uses all those Substance Painters, but then this also means that Studio Polygon doesn't post stuff on Steam, and they post stuff on their own website, which has various negative aspects, I personally think, and which other people have highlighted, although not everyone agrees with those. But nonetheless, that means that then this one, the Solo, if that was the case, would probably not be on Steam, but be on their own website, and would probably be at a higher price. And to be honest, I think the Solo as it is, apart from the sounds, is grand. I don't think all of that is necessary. I don't think all the extra hassle is necessary. And that's, I think, what is good about having different developers, that it is used in a different way. But everyone seems to want the UK community to be homogenized in the way they make buses, and I think that's an issue. So I think that's why people need to not necessarily make that comparison, because I think the comparison is different. And I think the comparison to the Lite and the 400 MC is also not quite, it's not quite up to date, because it's comparing it to a previous bus and a previous way of Studio Polygon doing things, because Studio Polygon is using higher quality stuff, this is probably one of the reasons they put it on their own website, and this means that basically the way it's sold and the whole strategy is different to what V3D has done. Because V3D doesn't really care that much about the money, I think. Like, he's not constantly like pushing sales and advertising the bus. You know, again, obviously because you have an important airsoft to do that, but like he's literally said, if you don't like the bus, don't buy it. So, you know, he's kind of happy to forego sales. So I don't think that's a major issue. But I don't think that, you know, price is a major thing he's concerned about. But the point there being is that I think the issue with the whole Backlash is, yes, the complaints about the sounds are incredible. The complaints about the textures, I think some of it's reasonable, like the engine, although how relevant it is to the overall experience, I don't think is that necessary. I think the whole problem is, I guess, it's a few people who want really high quality buses, but then trying to impose these standards on everyone else who doesn't really care about all those high quality buses. Like, they've even said like themselves in Steam reviews, I think it was like the, actually to be fair, maker of the Renown said that most of these texture things wouldn't be noticed by the average player. This therefore kind of highlights that this is actually not that relevant for the average player that basically has used older texturing methods. So I think then what this means is, by the community complaining that this is not to the level of Studio Polygon and to the Master Switch, is ignoring the fact that basically one, these are bigger studios who invest a lot more time and resources into the buses, whereas V3D is a smaller studio that doesn't invest that much time into the buses, and hence, you know, why the whole strategy is different. Like, V3D kind of cuts all this crap, like for instance, and this is why it's, I guess, good to have different developers. I think it's just good to have different styles, because then you get different results. Because for instance, like with Master Studios and with like especially Studio Polygon, you get these long periods of like, you know, hype build up and screenshots and all this, where V3D kind of just cuts to the crap once the bus is ready, he releases it, and he doesn't do any of like that stuff. Some people prefer this, some people don't. This is the benefit of having, you know, different developers have different styles, and then V3D puts it on Steam, Studio Polygon doesn't. Again, this has different people, it means they get different benefits. Some like it, some don't. But the thing about having this option with developers do it different ways means that, you know, if you don't like it, you don't get it, which is essentially how it does work. And like, look, people have the right to complain. I think that's fair. Like, look, if people don't like the bus, they can absolutely point it. Like, if people don't like the substance paint, that's fair. But I think what the problem is, like, there's been a lot of backlash, and there's been a lot of like fuel thrown to the fire where it's not necessary, and there's been imposition of standards that I don't think need to be imposed necessarily. Don't need to be imposed to that level. I think this is probably why you see like people within the Omsi community, for instance, like the developer of Adelon, rarely post any updates and only post stuff when it's ready, because there's constant backlash and complaining. We even saw this with, and I think this is kind of illustrative because this was released 1 week after V3D released the Olympian for a brief period as early access, and he did this for free. And this is one thing to mention, this is not something that Studio Polygon has ever done, nor Master Studios has ever done. So I think people also need to remember the fact that V3D has released a lot of buses for free for the community, invested time that he's got no return from, which is not the case for other developers that people keep comparing them to. And also he's made a lot less profit from the buses compared to other people. So I think it's just meant to put it in retrospect, because some people are saying he should have invested profits of the spectrum into the substance painter, but again, it's kind of highlighting that, well, he's made a lot more free buses beforehand, so maybe expecting him to invest the profits in that is or is not reasonable. But look, that's an aside in of itself. But basically, the whole point with this is that at the end of the day, I think the issue then with Backlash is you just get people who don't bother within the you know, don't bother too much engage with the Omsi community. Because when the Olympian was released, for example, there was still backlash. Now, I don't necessarily think the way it was dealt with was really the best way. I think the whole thing of removing the link was completely pointless, because all it did was people who were complaining got rewarded because they got exclusivity, although they kind of didn't because it's on Omsi World. And now you have YouTubers who used Omsi World to get the Olympian, but then claim when people ask for the links, they're like, oh no, you can't get it because the link's not available, even though they literally used Omsi World most likely. The correlations are there. And that's just highlighting some of the other peculiarities when it, because, you know, it's kind of ironic when someone says, oh yeah, the link's not there, when they literally used you know, this is because they're trying to pretend that they didn't use Omsi World when they did. They're not even in technical service Discord, so there's no way they got the link. There's no way it's very unlikely they would have got the link when it was released on Discord, considering they're not even in the server. But look, that's a whole matter in of itself. But again, I think it just kind of highlights sometimes within the Omsi community the kind of like things that happen, I guess, which is just drama altogether. But look, I think, folks, what I'm trying to say is that, like, people need to be careful what they wish for, because I think all this backlash is just going to lead to, it's kind of leading to this tribalist mentality, and some people have called clicking. Some people have like kind of said that there seems to be this like whole clicky thing going on, like, you know, it's all like one versus the other, and like one developer versus another, or like, you know, one developer's fan base versus another developer's fan base. And look, that may be true, that may not be true. I'll let you make your own judgment call on that. But I think, you know, by developers trying to like basically throw when I say developers, like, I mean like some developers trying to throw shade at others and like, you know, just stir drama and profiteer off, you know, a bad release, considering they've had bad, they themselves have had problematic products, is just not great for the community, and just results in the community getting less buses. It results in more people disengaging, and ultimately it's just completely unnecessary. And then, you know, people complain like, oh yeah, but the link never got released. But well, what do you expect when people like unnecessarily made complaints about things that are just, to be fair, I think was just over the top. And like, so I think ultimately the moral of the story is that, you know, I think people seem to think that this high standards of mass switch use and Studio Polygon necessarily translate to V3D. I've explained why probably that's not necessarily the case, and that when we're comparing price points, we need to bear in mind that, you know, they were priced at different times, and they're probably like, if the light was released now, it would have been a different price than it was released previously. And that being said, my personal take on the Solo is, look, I think the Solo, like, it's what you expect from V3D. Like, okay, the sounds are a bit worse, like, it's probably like similar quality to the Enviro 200 MC, but it's not like dreadful, and it's certainly not as bad as people make it out to be. So I think, you know, it's fair enough to make these complaints, but I think when this becomes a bit more, when it comes like, you know, kind of a whole thing about drama, and not even talk about like, oh yes, and look, maybe I don't think necessarily V3D like removing the comments from the Discord server and just getting rid of everything that was said was the best way to deal with it. I personally don't agree with censorship, so I'm never going to stand by such a decision. So in case people try to say that, oh yes, I'm supporting V3D, I'm not. I'm just giving you my take on it. I don't really have any allegiance to any development studio. I'm not a staunch supporter of either. I know there are staunch supporters of like Studio Polygon, as there are staunch supporters of V3D. I don't classify myself as either. I'm just giving you, based off what I've read, what my take on it is, and that's really all that there is to it. But you know, ultimately, I think some of the negative reviews are warranted about the sounds. They are being improved on. I think Backlash is being fueled unnecessarily, and I think there's too many complaints. I think overall the bus is pretty much what we expected, less the sounds, so I don't really think it's that bad. I think the reviews are probably a bit too harsh. I think people also seem to have a short memory, because the light by no stretch of the imagination was great, and V5TL also has issues with the sounds. It doesn't really sound like V5TL either, so it's not like the sounds on other buses are great. Like Master Studio sounds were actually quite low as well. Like, to be fair, they're not bad, like they didn't got better, but like, you know, the sounds of the Master Studio buses, like originally like of the B5 LHs, until like the whole scripting mod came in and fixes came in, weren't that ideal either, because they were too low, and they also had some issues. Now, to be fair, like that's just my take on it, but like Master Studios, to be fair, hasn't been stirring anything and hasn't been adding fuel to the fire. I mean, that's just more because they're brought up in the reviews, so I'm just kind of highlighting that these stuff happen. And also, like, when the 400 MC was released, the optimization was absolutely dreadful. Like, at least this bus drives smoothly, doesn't have any issues with performance. Okay, less the texture issues. Like, when I say texture issues, I mean that the 4GB patch, even with the 4GB patch, the bus basically, after a while, just turns blank because I don't know, there's some heavy textures being used. But I guess, you know, that's another thing just to highlight, not ideal, which also seems to have been missed by many people. I think someone mentioned it, but yeah, that's also a bit annoying because the textures are basically, you're getting your typical Omsi 2 RAM issues because it's a 32-bit engine. So yeah, folks, let me know what you think about this whole drama. I mean, I don't really want to say anything because I don't really want to add too much to it. I just thought I'd give my kind of take on the Backlash, because I think it's just important to bear in mind that this has implications for like other developers, and then people are wondering why we don't see much stuff being built, and well, it's precisely, I guess, for these reasons. So I guess at the end of the day, that's really all there is to say. Also, I think I'm just gonna skip a few steps because I'm pretty sure I've taken a wrong turn because we were here before, so yeah. Okay. Also, like, since they updated the Solo, there seems to be a lot more gear slips on this. Okay. Folks, I'm actually just going to end the video here because I've kind of said all that there is to say and there's no point in just driving around. So, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about the Solo and what you think about the whole Backlash. I guess, in summary, the complaints about the sounds and stuff is justified. I think some of the complaints about not using textures and using the same sounds as Studio Polygon and Master Studios are not necessary because, again, people fail to recognize that they're different studios and hence that they use different. Oh, sorry, there's the last stop. Never mind. I'll just drive to the last stop because it's right there. And that some of the parts of this map just look the same, and they use different methods for making those buses. Means that, you know, I think people fail to realize that, well, if V3D had gone to the level that Studio Polygon had gone, one bus would have been released later, and two, technically there'd be more chance for it to be higher price and be released externally. So I think those are things just worth accounting for. So all in all, I think careful what people wish for. I think sometimes, like, some of the stuff is fair, but some of the stuff is, and especially like stuff about the tires, like, what are people on about? But look, that's really that, you know. So yeah, that is the Solo. But to be honest, I personally think it does the job. And to be fair, like, V3D's freeware buses were always payroll quality, so I think that's why when people say, like, people say, oh yeah, but like the Infinite 200 MC is free and that's better. But that was okay, maybe not the 200 MC, because I think like I think the B70 LX400 is better, but that was a payroll quality bus was free. So, you know, bear that in mind. Anyway, folks, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think about the Solo and the Backlash. Bye for now.